ever pause to reflect on the moments that shape our faith and beliefs? I'm Danny, and in this podcast, Countryside Christian, we embark on a journey together to explore the raw and personal path to faith. We often see the finished product of faith, perhaps a manager of a church ministry, or someone standing in a pulpit. But we rarely talk about the messy middle, or we see the harvest, but rarely talk about the tilling of the soil. We ignore the challenges, the discoveries, and the profound loneliness that often accompanies the start of a spiritual walk. This podcast is for those who are currently starting that journey or even questioning where you are. By pulling back the curtain on what it actually feels like to step into a church for the first time or wrestle with an ancient text in a modern world. At the beginning of each podcast, I will pray for what is on my mind and this podcast. I would like to formally welcome you to this podcast. Let's pause for prayer. Lord God, as I open my heart, mind, and soul with the aim of inspiring others to take their first steps towards you, or to find you again in their everyday lives, may you guide my words. Thank you for this opportunity to share my testimony, and for the grace to keep focusing on my growth as I continue to be learnt in your ways. You give us all gifts. Let it be known that you give without expectation to receive. You plant seeds and nourish us so that we may learn to give to others without receiving. Help us, Lord, to learn how to nourish those around us in return. Amen. Amen. Having asked for that guidance, I want to welcome you properly to the first chapter of our journey. Whether you are listening while walking the dog, commuting to work, or sitting quietly at home, I'm glad you are here. I have learnt that we cannot talk about where we're going without first acknowledging where we have been. To understand the why behind this podcast, I need to take you back to the very beginning, to the rolling fields of my childhood and the stone walls of a small church where my story truly started. When I look back at the very start of my life, it wasn't a grand awakening. It was much quieter. In childhood, faith felt as natural as the countryside around me. I was born to parents who believe in God, though they are not outward facing to the world with their faith. They set their morals, values, and even traditions we followed by the Christian calendar. Looking back, I remember the simple, unquestioned stories and the safety of a belief system that I had not yet tested. It was a season of receiving, without even knowing I was being nourished. I hold no judgment for how my parents express their belief. Instead, I pray they are on their own path with Jesus to discover his infinite love and kindness. It was within this quiet, foundational setting that my own journey began. I was christened in a small church called St. Mary's. It was within those walls that the fire of my faith was first kindled, and where it grew. But as the years passed, it was also the place where the same faith struggled and eventually was destroyed. To understand how I found my way back, we have to look at what caused those foundations to crumble. Tune in next week to find out more about my testimony. That's all for now. Let's move on to the next section, the search for hidden treasure. I spent years questioning, and I have learnt that questioning isn't the opposite of faith, it's the start of it. If you feel like you are still searching rather than arriving, please know that this space and this passage from Proverbs chapter 2, verses 3 to 5 is for you. The word tells us, "Indeed, If you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. This passage frames the beginning of faith as an active quest. It gives you permission to ask the hard questions and to cry out for insight. It promises that such a sincere search leads to a genuine relationship with God. To me, this podcast is my way of picking up the spade and starting that search. I am no longer looking for the simple stories of my childhood at St. Mary's. I am searching for the hidden treasure of a faith that survives the modern world. I invite you to pick up your own spade and dig alongside me. The writer of Proverbs makes it clear, understanding doesn't just sit on the surface like loose topsoil. It is a treasure that we have to cry out for and dig deep to find. I have learned that the first step isn't just about showing up, it's about being willing to get our hands dirty in the search for what is true. But what does that digging look like when the ground is hard and you are feeling exhausted? To help us understand how to pick up the spade when we're feeling like we have nothing left, I'm joined today by Adam. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So, just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be doing, we're just going to have a little bit of a general conversation with some preemptive questions that I've already got. So, one of the first things that I want to ask you is, it's more about every field has a history before the plough touches it. For me, it was decades feeling like an outsider at St. Mary's. What did your before Jesus look like, and what was the moment you realised you couldn't leave it any longer?
Well, for me, I had a lot of anxiety, which I think is something that a lot of newcomers I've spoken to have also had. I had this tremendous sort of internal kind of stress about death and what comes after, and all of those kinds of things that so many people struggle with. But I was actually at a very happy time in my life overall. Good job, recently married, got a little boy at home who's just great. So a lot of things were going really well, but I still just had maybe a sense that there was something missing. I'd had an interest in spirituality. I'd looked into kind of Buddhism and things like that, some of those philosophies, and while some of it felt very helpful, I never quite meshed with it. And I met somebody at work who was a pastor and a scientist, which quite an interesting combination. And he told me his story, which was just fascinating. And I was so amazed by the story he told me. I came home and told my wife. And the two of us just started talking. And next thing you know, we've started reading the Bible, and then we've said, hey, I think it's finally time to give this a go and actually step foot into a church. And that was really how it all got going for us.
Wow, that's quite amazing. So let's just kind of touch on some of the things that you mentioned there. So when we talk about anxiety, that's something that we all feel probably quite early on in our journey. Did you feel that on the lead up to the beginning of your journey, and what sort of things was it impacting?
Okay, well, I'd always struggled with anxiety, but there definitely was quite a lot of anxiety with, especially going into church. From a perspective afterwards, there was absolutely no need, but it was in my past life I hadn't been sort of religious. Say past life, I mean you're growing up. So my parents weren't religious. My mum very casually was. I hadn't really grown up with any friends that were Christians or anything like that. And to be honest, in my younger years, I was almost sort of anti-religion, I guess. I was really kind of against it. Not in the sense that I dislike anyone that was religious, but just I was so staunch in my views and my ways. But it never really brought me any sense of peace, and that was a big problem for me. I always had this kind of sense of impending doom that you get with anxiety, and nothing seemed to quite take it away. It was just always in the background, sort of humming away. And I've definitely found it easier to kind of turn that off, or just dull that down a little bit since coming and learning about Jesus.
Well, thank you for sharing on that one. So you mentioned that you started your journey by meeting someone at work who was a scientist and a Christian. What sort of stories were they telling you?
Oh, it was an amazing story. I absolutely love it. I'll try and sort of keep it concise. But so he was from Africa, and he grew up in Africa with a religion that was sort of had sort of rituals and witchcraft, and it was kind of a traditional religion. He moved to England to study at university, and sort of similar to me, he found himself kind of looking at all different religions. He said he joined up with the Hare Krishnas for a bit, looked at Buddhism, looked at spirituality, all these kinds of things. And one day he's walking past a church, and I should say all the while since he was a child, he's had this terribly embarrassing problem, which is that he wets the bed every night. And it hasn't gone away as he's grown up. So he's tried everything, gone to doctors, therapists, gone through his religion and all of the others, trying to find something that might just help it. Because he's now coming up to 30, and he's terribly ashamed of this. So he walks past this church, and he sort of looks in with a bit of curiosity and thinks maybe I'll go through. But then that little sort of voice holds you back, says, I can't do it. And he does this 2-3 more times. And he said on the 4th time, he felt it was like somebody giving him a gentle but firm nudge on the back, and he sort of stumbled in, and he sat down, and the person that was given the sermon actually said, there's somebody here that is really struggling with this problem, and he said they're wetting the bed. And I mean, for him, he was just, and he didn't actually come forward. He couldn't. He was so embarrassed, and the man was saying, well, if you don't want to come forward, you don't need to be ashamed. You just need to come forward, accept Jesus, and he'll heal you. And he came back to the church a 2nd time, and the pastor says it again, and he stays seated. And the 3rd time, he says it again. And this time he thinks, I'm going to have to get up. And when he goes forward, the pastor says, do you accept Jesus? And he said, yes, I want to know his love, and I want to love him. And the pastor said to him, you're healed. And that was it. And he didn't really feel any different initially, but he never wet the bed again after that day.
Wow.
And I just thought that was such a powerful story. It just totally cured him with this thing that he was so ashamed of. And then he said that he wanted to give his life to Christ after that, and eventually became a pastor himself.
That's amazing. That is really, really amazing. I'm just going to kind of rewind a little bit, but it kind of talks about what you was talking about with the pastor. So I remember the physical weight of the anxiety before walking back into church. When you stood at the door of this journey, what was the biggest stone or the doubt or fear that you felt to clear out of the way before you got started?
I think, as I touched on, having been quite sort of staunch in my disbelief at one point, there was that sense of hypocrisy to me that was holding me back. It was kind of, I guess, a judgment from others. Well, wait, you said this, you've always been this way. So how come you've suddenly turned around? And I guess really sort of my peers was a big concern for me. Got a lot of friends that aren't Christian. I thought honestly that some of them would just sort of think I was losing my mind, because that's the kind of people that I've been around. So I think that was a huge that was a huge kind of barrier for me. And I decided, at least initially, that I wouldn't really tell anyone. I was very, very grateful that my wife was really open and receptive to the message of Christ. So we went together the first time, and no looking back after that. It was it was I told my mum soon afterwards, and I told my friend, and they did, to be fair, give me a little bit of stick for it, but I can handle that. It's it was just a bit of friendly jibing, but what I've gained from it is so much more than what I've lost, and that really was the big thing.
You've really touched on something quite important there. We do have a lot more to gain through our love for Jesus and wanting to know more and ask those questions than what we are to lose. So, you was talking about some different bits where your wife came with you to church, telling your mum and dad, and how they kind of interestingly was quite curious about why you changed. But can you share a specific moment where you felt a tiny flicker of reassurance, the first bit of magic in the dirt that told you were on the right path?
Yeah, I think it would probably be when the service started. We'd sat down. My wife was really nervous. I was really nervous. And looking back, I'm not too sure why, but it's quite a big church that we went to. And they start up with some music. They have a band that plays. They sing some nice kind of songs that they say they like to start the sermon by praising God and talking about his glories and accomplishments, to kind of remind people of what they're there for, So the music starts up, and I'm looking around, and I had this sort of preconceived notion that everything would be sort of fire and brimstone, and everyone would be pointing the finger, you're not a good Christian, all that kind of thing. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I was looking at just rows and rows of people that all were smiling, some of them singing, some of them with their arms out, but they were all happy, and they all looked, full of love for the people that they'd come with, the people in the church, and of course the love that they were bringing to Jesus that day and God. It was that kind of that togetherness, that sense of community, and then as it moved on, I could sort of feel the energy of it. It was, it was just a real lift of everything. Like, you left your worries at the door, and everyone was here for the single purpose that was greater than them. And I think just that feeling, that was like nothing I'd felt before. So that just erased all doubt.
That's amazing. So between the people that supported you on the journey, seeing those friendly faces, which are obviously displaying love during this time, but one of the things that I've kind of reflected on is how much love is kind of shown to you as you come into the church nowadays, how much more charismatic it is versus what our original perception, just as you said, fire and brimstone. So as we kind of go along that journey, we have to learn to take accountability for our own walk. How have you found your way to discipline to keep up picking the spade on the days when the soil feels hard, rather than just stay inside?
Well, to start with, something that I try and remind myself is that when I start to learn about this, I start to learn how Jesus gave his life for us, so that we could live and obviously praise him and spread the word, but also so that we could be forgiven. And it was such a sort of a moving and beautiful act. And I think it's kind of funny to say out loud. I think, do I want to stand before him one day after he's done this for me and say, actually, I couldn't be bothered that day. It's just, it's almost sort of a funny thought, I think. But it's quite sobering to say, actually, even though it's raining outside, in context, this isn't that bad, is it? Just to go, and I try and just sort of internally watch my behavior. If I find myself thinking or doing something that I think would be out of the teaching of the Bible, I sort of try and acknowledge it and sort of assess it. Why am I following this train? Is this productive? And I found through kind of calling myself out on these things that slowly they've started to reduce. They're just not happening so much. So I'm not having to do that because I'm kind of training myself to, a lot of these things are just subconscious things, maybe things that you've just done for so long that you don't really think about, but just kind of challenging that when it pops up and saying, do a bit better.
Oh yeah, I definitely know that feeling well. When you kind of reflect on something, I could have done that better, and then you go, right, but how do I move to the next time and do that better, rather than dwelling on what's in the past, where I think a lot of the old mentality, we used to dwell so much on what was in the past that we didn't actually see what was before us, and would repeat the same mistakes over and over, and would then add more to our burden. Whereas if we kind of take that stone, lift it up and go, right, I'm going to look you in the face and I'm going to know that that is my part of what I've done. I'm going to learn from this and I'm going to put that down there, and that's going to stay there. So then that way I don't need to think about it again. I can just go, right, I've learned from that. This is how I'm going to act next time. So
I think that's really apt. Something early on that I struggled with was kind of thinking that each mistake was the end of the world. I'm never going to be accepted. I've made this mistake, and now, but I've come to know that it's more about how you learn from your mistakes, so that God forgives all. And I think it's more about the content of your heart, how willing you are to change, how much you want to be on the right path, and also that you're learning from those mistakes rather than repeating them.
Oh, that's some fantastic stuff that we've definitely delved into tonight. Just thinking about some of the closing advice. If someone was listening to this episode and they are right at their own beginning, what is one piece of advice you would give them to help them survive their first week in the field?
I think I'd tell them to just go. I think at the start, most people are probably just terrified of walking through the door. Tell you the worst case scenario is you think this isn't for me and you walk away and nothing else happens. Best case scenario, it could just totally change your life. So I think, you have to be a bit brave maybe, but just do it. Rip the Band-Aid off and you'll be thankful after.
That's brilliant, Adam. Definitely some good advice there. Thank you for joining me for this chapter of the journey. I hope that by sharing the dirt of our stories today, you have learned that your own field doesn't need to be perfect to be precious. As you head back into your week, whether you're returning to the office, the warehouse, or the quiet of the fields, remember that the Father is the ultimate manager of our growth. He does not fear the stones in your path, and he is not always ready to help you with the heavy lifting. If you feel that you have felt a flicker of curiosity today, I encourage you to take your own first step. Pick up the spade, be honest with the soil, and look for the magic in the dirt. I'm Danny, and this is Countryside Christian. I look forward to tilling the next row with you in our next episode. God bless and keep walking.